If I said to you the last year of television or the backside of television, and you don't even know what I'm talking about, where have you been? Get on Binge now and take a look at these fantastic shows. The force behind them joins us in just a moment. Mitch McTaggart, welcome, and thank you for battling through some major technical issues.
It's a pleasure to be here for the first time.
Were you always interested in television?
I think so. One of the earliest things I remember doing is making a TV guide on a typewriter, typing a TV guide of shows that I would like to show on my TV network. I was just a nerd.
Well, we all did stuff like that. You know, I made Panavision cameras. I spoke to Aaron, who made a replica of the 7 Nightly News set in cardboard in his bedroom. You know,
Incredible.
We all have hopes and dreams.
That's far more creative than my thing. I'm just sitting in a chair, not crafting stuff out of cardboard.
There were often time slot issues. So you had the ideal time slots. I remember a show I was involved in, Lena Woodley, was put in the 6 p.m. Sunday evening slot.
Yeah, the Doctor Who kind of era time slot, I recall. The classic Doctor Who, I mean.
Yes.
Which is, it's no one really thinks of that as a comedy time slot, which is weird. It's interesting with TV originally how important a time slot was.
Yes.
Because whether or not, even before it's considered whether or not a show is actually good, it's got to be in this slot that is, considered the right kind of genre time slot. It's weird to consider time as also a consideration of genre, if that makes sense.
Well, absolutely it does, because I've been speaking to people recently and they speak about the Friday night murder mystery slot. Wednesday is traditionally now, at least, comedy night. So for those who still watch terrestrial TV, I think time slot is very important.
One of the things that I have talked about in the backside of television is the scheduling of the sci-fi series Farscape on Channel 9, because one of the many reasons that it didn't really take off here is that Channel 9 and Australian TV in particular didn't have a sci-fi time slot. So that there wasn't a specific time slot that was known for sci-fi or even original interesting programming. So it was just kind of dumped on a Saturday night because that was the best thing they had. And for that reason, it really did not take off the way it should have.
It was a very innovative and quite brilliant series for its time.
Absolutely.
You went to Deakin University, where you studied film and digital media as well as doing honours. You subsequently worked there as a tutor. Did you think you'd be where you are now?
I expected to still be teaching. I always joke that the one thing that course taught me was how to teach it. But it also is great to be able to be making TV now. And a thing that did come out of the course that was obviously very helpful was that, I learned how the industry basically works, or in some cases doesn't work.
Mm-hmm.
And also, all of the mates I made at university are the ones who I am working with now in making TV, which is great. So I have university to thank for those social connections as well.
You already thought that the entertainment industry was in decline when you left around 2011.
It was a weird kind of vibe learning about an industry that at that point felt like was declining. And so we grew up in 90s TV and stuff where everything was still very much in its heyday. I think probably the heyday is more 80s than 90s. But we grew up on TV just being this big deal. If you were on TV, you were royalty, you've made it, that kind of thing. But 2010s, late 2000s, when it was just kind of waning slightly, there was far less enthusiasm about going into the industry, and we felt that, I think. And so it kind of forced us to maybe rethink exactly what our expectations were in going in, which I think also kind of contributed to us making sure that we were multidisciplined in stuff that we did. We've all kind of got backgrounds in editing and producing and a little bit of directing and just like dabbling in all these other fields because we really didn't know where we were going to land. It wasn't maybe as defined as what it could have been even 10 years beforehand.
Diversification is the key now. Everybody says it. I despair for those studying media now, because where do you go? You were saying it was even problematic then.
Yeah, I'd really love to gauge the vibe of how it is going at universities, like learning those skills, if that process has changed since the time that we were there.
You said even back then there was consideration given to reducing the number of commercial networks as our population just simply isn't big enough.
Yeah, well, I mean, by back then, I was talking about in the 70s, there was a brief discussion where they were going to consider the positives of abolishing a network just to cater to the current population a little more adequately. The comparison they made was in the US, where the population is roughly 10 times that of Australia, and they only had 3 big commercial networks,
Yes.
3 major ones rather, and that made sense financially relative to the population. And so for us to have a tenth of the population but the same amount of commercial television stations just didn't really seem to add up, which is weird that we're kind of very slowly circling back to that discussion. No one's really saying it that publicly, but it's like, well, we all know that something's kind of got to give here in terms of dwindling ad sales, dwindling viewers, all this kind of stuff. And no one wants to admit that the next step is getting rid of one properly this time. But no one wants to put their hand up and be that one.
That's specifically why I'm mentioning it, because it is circling back to that. And there is conversation about it. No one wants to put their hand up, as you say, but financially and viewership-wise, it's a reality.
And I know, I mean, at the point of us having this conversation, all signs point to say 10, but I mean, I feel like that's cyclical, because even 10 or so years ago, Channel 9 was in pretty severe financial doldrums. And then even like going back to the late 80s, early 90s, Channel 7 was terrible. And there's just these, there'd even been a lot of other instances in between publicly that we know about. And so I think if 10 holds on just a little bit longer, maybe one of the other networks will start to dip again, and then just the cycle will continue. It's just, it is a hot potato.
Yes, it may be them at the moment. But what did you think, for example, of the Bob Shanks era at 10 in 89? Family Double Dare, Candid Camera, Price is Right, Super Quiz, weird current affairs shows. Is it back to the
Yeah, I'd love to do a proper dive into Bob Shanks era, because it sounds wonderful.
It was incredible, to say the least. After Deakin, you did the production rites of passage, editing dance school packages.
The editing a dance school end of year concert is like nothing before or since. And it's something that I really hope remains in the past. I'm not against the dance schools themselves, but editing them is robotic, monotonous, and pretty uncreative. And I never want to hear the song Starlight Express again. It's just a whingy song that everybody seems to dance to, and like it really, I'm not even sure if those dance schools are a good measure of the skill of dance, of the discipline of it, because I came away from all of that not really liking dance that much. Is it just that specific kind of dance, or am I done now as a dancer? Like, I can never do that because I've just seen it done so average for so long. Anyway, it keeps me up at night.
Well, that's a sad thing to keep you up at night. I think it's like anything, you'll get your absolute stars in the class and you'll get those that really can't do it.
Yeah, and everybody also got a dance solo regardless. Everybody had to do a bit, and then we're talking about this too much, but the at the end, the what do you call it? The teacher, the head teacher, would always get like this big bouquet of flowers, like she did this thing, and everybody would be crying and stuff because she did this thing. Like she just made some kids go up on a stage and dance. Like let's get some perspective, people.
So you got a job as an editor of TVCs and online videos. What sort of work did you do?
Mostly like regional commercials, corporate comms, like internal stuff. The regional commercials were always quite fun because they were so specific and localized, and it didn't have that creative netting of, the big ad agencies with buy-in and kind of, discussing the finer details of a semicolon or whatever. Like with the regional spots, we're talking shouty car ads in like a regional town with a one day in July only, come buy a car, like really specific stuff that would only air once. And I liked the simplicity of those because it was just, they were so happy with just, text on screen. They'd be like, wow, how'd you do that? Like, no.
Well, maybe cheap seats have taken that space now, but perhaps you could look into those on your shows as well.
Well, that's a good point, actually. Like with the spread of, I guess, criticism and review programs that are on TV now, it's good that we've kind of got our own little niche kind of thing. So like the cheap seats has those silly kind of fun, I don't know what you want to call them, little smaller jokes, like smaller bits that they can just kind of refine and build up on. And then I guess like the weekly and the yearly have more world events, political stuff, kind of analysis from everywhere. And our little niche is, specifically Australian broadcast television with more of a focus on the actual shows themselves as opposed to the ads. And so we've kind of, it feels nice that we all have our little area to shine on, and that we're not treading on each other's boots. I assume. I feel I'm not doing it.
I don't think you are, and I think it's great to have parameters. Make sure that you do not tread on each other's toes.
Parameters and the boundaries were more just for us without even having considered what everybody else was doing, because we thought that the best way to be, good at the analysis of Australian TV, for example, is to just focus exclusively on that. And when we were like starting out thinking about doing this kind of show, we were like, well, what should the scope be? What do we need? What do we need this to be? And one of the concerns was that in the very, very first one that we did, like the last year of television, I thought, oh God, there's not going to be anywhere near enough Australian TV to talk about for an hour. Like that seems so impossible because no one else has done it. And then obviously the more we got into it, the easier and the more interesting it is to talk about, to the point where each last year of television actually gets longer. So the last one, the most recent one we did was like 68 minutes, which I feel is pushing it. But my director says, nah, it's fine. I feel like as long as it's under 70, it's not hitting 70, then people can kind of accept 60 something as still an hour. Do you know what I mean? It's all psychological stuff, perhaps.
It is. They're very arbitrary at the times. I guess in comedy, you regard it as when something becomes less potent.
Yeah, very much. And we always have a big discussion as to how long can we feasibly make this? How long should we make this? And like the streaming era has removed those time restrictions entirely. So it's way more put upon the creators to determine that this is how long it should go for. And I think our shows are as long as they need to be. correct me, this is hard coming from the person who makes the show, so I don't think I can comment properly on it. But our thinking is that with the combination of like longer form segments and little segments and stuff, the fact that you're watching the show in the first place suggests that you do have an interest in Australian television. Therefore, we can kind of pivot that a little bit and go a little bit longer if we need to. And we haven't had any complaints yet, so we can check back on this and see.
I don't think you'll have any complaints. I think the comments are testimony to the fact that people are loving it, plus obviously the ratings.
That's good.
Whatever they call them these days. I was sharing with you an anecdote that colleagues of mine were really enjoying the Man Oh Man deep dive.
That's good. I'm glad that we get feedback on the super niche stuff, because that's, I think, where the show really shines. And to be able to have somehow developed a show where we can justify talking about Man Oh Man for 20 minutes that is really exciting to me. It's the fact that we can get away with doing it. And, the initial concerns about, can we talk about Man Oh Man for 20 minutes? And the answer being, yes, of course you can. Who else is going to do this? Therefore you should. And with all of that in mind, I think the approach to any of the stuff that we do is always going to be, here's this obscure thing, but how can we make you care about it? So it's always, it doesn't matter if no one's heard of this specific show or any other kind of like niche scandal. The point is, we want to make it entertaining and we want it to be fun and you to have an interest in it and stuff. And to be able to do that, to have a platform to be able to do that is really rewarding.
I think the listeners of this platform are particularly interested in all that. Do you want to briefly tell us your angle with Man Oh Man?
Yeah, sure. We start off with looking at just a typical Man Oh Man episode and what it entails, and basically the fact that there was a purpose-built swimming pool built in the studio floor at the old Channel 7 studios, which still remains, as we all know. But then what we do is we pivot into how the show was scheduled when it aired in 1994 up against the second half of Hey Hey It's Saturday on Channel 9. And we go blow by blow, week to week, in terms of how Hey Hey It's Saturday reacted to the show, which for half of its run, Man Oh Man outrated Hey Hey and was this big success that was potentially going to overthrow Hey Hey It's Saturday. And so an elaborate scheme was hatched, and the rest is history. But it's exactly that, going back to what I said about it being so niche and forgotten or whatever, it's a fun thing that happened that no one's going to remember. Why would anybody remember that? No one, there's no expectation on anybody to know what the
In my memory, I worked on a
1994.
couple of them.
There you go, of course. And so I guess that goes back to my point even more, in that aside from industry people who were connected to the shows, to kind of blow this out and show it to other people as this kind of appealing Game of Thrones style battle, but played out in this very kind of micro fashion. Yeah, it's fun. It's fun stuff.
It was a really bizarre show. Can you give us an elevator pitch of what the show was?
10 male contestants try to be the winner of this competition, which is voted only by women in the audience who are getting more and more drunk on champagne as the episode progresses. And with each talent show round, I'm doing inverted quotes there for listeners, they eliminate a man by pushing them into the purpose-built swimming pool, which is only used in that elimination bit for like a couple of seconds each time. Yeah, more and more talent segments until there's a winner who wins a holiday to Vanuatu with for him and a unknown woman, presumably someone from the audience, but he just gets a trip for two, and they do it all again the next week. It's just it's an unchanging format. It just was the same thing each time, and I guess the one variation was what each of the contestants would bring in terms of a talent. When I say talent, I mean nothing. There was no talent there.
Well done in describing it. It's brought back memories for me. I do remember the theme being played and the models who pushed men into the pool that do this faux sort of thing where they decided whether or not to push them in the pool.
They really nailed the spectacle of it, I think.
Do you know if that format is still going anywhere in the world?
I really don't feel like they would have survived beyond the 90s. But don't quote me on that. It's, I mean, come on. It's not still around. It can't be.
Of its time. But I think it was even, controversial in its time.
Yeah, everybody seemed to talk about the sexism or the reverse sexism, which is really not a term that makes sense in the context of a show like Man Oh Man. But, whatever. Hey, it got people talking.
And it got a pool built in the 7 studios.
It did, which cost half the entire budget.
Well, excuse my lack of chronology, but you also spent a short time presenting morning radio on Joy FM.
I did. That was a good training ground for me because basically it taught me how to write a joke. Because regardless, every week there was 3 hours of content to fill, and so there needed to be. You just had to fill it. We had to start, actually structuring it and like, oh, this is a way we can be funny. We can make this bit funny. We can talk about this and have that be funny. And which sounds like a really kind of basic thing to realize. But when you're having to output content, when you're forced to output content, it really forces you to find patterns and formulas and things. And so you fall into a habit of like, okay, we've got to end on a joke. Here's the thing we can do, blah, 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 blah. And so it really taught me that structure, which absolutely was used now, like with the kind of stuff that we're creating. And I absolutely have breakfast radio, that brief period of having done it as a to credit to help me with this.
People like you make it look easy, but there are disciplines. So you wrote and produced comedy for Channel 31 out of that?
Yes, yeah, we were kind of a bit of crossover with that. This was all kind of during doing the corporate video stuff,
right,
dabbling in radio at the same time, dabbling in Channel 31 stuff. And that was also a great outlet of just, here's something, here's a weird idea that we have, let's visualize it in television and get it put on Channel 31. It was a really nice process to get into the habit of, because you could really test comic ideas and formats and stuff and just go through the process of actually having it go to air, which I think back in that era especially, it was still romanticized to have have a show on air. Like it's a nice thing to be able to do. And like coming up from watching TV in the 90s and stuff, that was the process that we'd fallen in love with, like making TV, getting it on TV and, watching it go to air. And so it was nice to get that whole experience with Channel 31. And I think that kind of became for us what I think the ABC was in the 80s for the kind of emerging comedian generation there. Because for whatever reason, ABC kind of lost that infrastructure toward the mid 2000s and whatnot. And so we had to find other means to do that.
Yes, and Channel 31 continues to be a small beacon of hope in that. You only have to look at the roll call. Everyone from Rove to Hamish and Andy, Daythorn, everyone along the way.
I think people often maybe don't appreciate stuff like that, in that, it's not just fish cam and caravan programming, of which the former has not aired on Channel 31 for some time anyway. But yeah, it is such a useful training ground. And like even all of the people that I work with my shows, they also had a training ground on Channel 31, but just weren't as camera facing, so therefore not as known. But there are just endless people who have had practice doing a Channel 31 show or community television show, just more broadly. Yeah, it's really undervalued, I think.
So important. And you did a version of the last year of television there.
Yeah, we did. I always consider it like a pilot, like a test run kind of thing, to basically try out the format, because why wouldn't we? Here's a process that we've already done in the past, like having produced TV shows, get it on air for 31. So let's try a format idea and just see how it goes, and go through the entire process of producing it, airing, all that kind of stuff. And because of that, because we went through all that, we had a working pilot at the end of it to go to SBS with and say, hey, do you want some of this? And they were like, yeah, cool. And that's that. It would not have happened that smoothly if we just went to them cold with no kind of physical working copy of anything. Like it absolutely helped that we were used to that production process already, thanks to Channel 31, and had stuff ready to go.
Yes, and not to diminish the other networks, but SBS has also been a great talent incubator.
Absolutely. Yes. Another kind of forgotten place in terms of training ground.
Coming up in part 2.
Someone at Binge saw a segment that we did where I did a little analysis on the concept of gay turmoil in Australian TV dramas, which basically argued that whenever there is a character who is gay, they're always struggling with it. It's nice that I'm able to be this representation of queer people on a television program that is criticizing television. Like that feels like a win to me for everybody. I feel like the solution to, say, Australian content is not having more relatable people. Like, I think a problem is that everything is too relatable. It's disappointing that we're still having this conversation in 2025. And I actually said during that last year of television, it's disappointing that we're still having this conversation in 2021. And we'll probably continue having it because it's just the way TV is. Look, TV is always going to be around. I don't buy into the theory that it's just going to all be in the bin in 10 years. Like it will continue on in some form. There is something good about a barrier to entry in that it does stop every man, woman, and child trying to get on TV for their 15 minutes of fame and stuff. I really dislike the rise of reality TV, and I don't like it how it's such a crutch for free-to-air networks especially.
Plenty more fascinating chats to come. Like, subscribe, see you soon.